What's going on, guys? My name is Matt, and the GT 1030 released almost a year ago, and its entrance marked the first time a GT series video card has been marketed towards gamers. Even with its low TDP and small size, I came to the conclusion that it had questionable value at best, and that unless you needed it for one of the aforementioned reasons, then it didn't make much sense to pick up. Well, a few things have changed since the last time I made a video about the GT 1030, and these changes prompted me to make this video, not only talking about these changes, but also talking about if the 1030 is overrated, and if at this point in time anyone should pick it up. So what's changed? Well, the first thing is price. For a very long time, the 1030 was just about the only GPU you could pick up for its MSRP. At $70, the 1030 made sense in some situations, but as of recent, the price has jumped up to over $100 on sites like Amazon and Newegg. Now you may be saying, but Matt, there's a 1030 right now on Amazon for $75, and though that is true, the 1030 you're seeing on screen isn't the same card as what myself and others have been reviewing over the past year, and that's where the other changes I alluded to earlier come into play. Recently, Nvidia silently released another version of the GT 1030 under the same name but with cut down specs. This new version of the 1030 uses slower DDR4 as opposed to the GDDR5 that the other 1030s come with, and not only this, but the new version is clocked lower, meaning these will perform worse than their full-fat counterparts. This is a classic example of a bait and switch, and whether intentional or not will directly impact consumers who aren't very knowledgeable in the realm of PC hardware, as the only way to distinguish the two versions is by looking deep in the specs of the product page. And this isn't the first case of something like this happening. This happened when Nvidia released the 3GB version of the GTX 1060, which had fewer CUDA cores, and even happened with AMD with their recent RX 560, which also has two versions with differing numbers of compute units. Even with all this being said, there still might be a reason to pick up a GT 1030, and in this video I'm going to assess whether or not that is the case. So let's first talk about what the GT 1030 has going for it. The biggest two advantage of going with the GT 1030 is its size and power usage. The 1030 comes in single slot half-height versions, meaning if your PC has a 16x PCIe slot, it's almost certain you'll be able to install a GT 1030. At only a 30W TDP for the OG GT 1030 and 20 watts for the new version of the 1030, these cards sip on power and again allow almost universal compatibility even with older pre-builds that can't supply a full 75 watts through the PCIe lane itself. Not only this, but the 1030 is actually okay for gaming. It can play most esports titles with ease, and even some AAA titles if you're willing to turn down some settings and live with lower frame rates. So how are we going to assess the value that this card is offering? Well, I thought the best way is to compare it to a card you can pick up for similar or lower price, and that card is the GTX 750 Ti, which regularly sells for around $70 give or take on sites like eBay. Though the GTX 750 Ti is an older card, it does make a compelling offer and even has some features the 1030 does not. Like the 1030, the 750 Ti just runs off of power from the PCIe slot itself, but at 75 watts it means that some pre-built systems may not be compatible if they can't supply the full amount of power needed. The 750 Ti also comes in low profile versions like the one I have, meaning while it doesn't quite have the universal compatibility of the 1030, it still will work in the majority of systems. This MSI one I have here I found after deal hunting for a while for around $50 on eBay, which as you'll see in a little bit is an amazing value. The 750 Ti, being a GTX series card, also offers some extra features through GeForce Experience like Shadowplay, which makes recording gameplay even on low-end systems a breeze. So now let's talk about testing. I tested both of these on a Ryzen 3 1200 system with 8GB of RAM, as I felt this would be a good representation of the type of system you may run one of these cards on, while also providing plenty of power as not to bottleneck either of these cards in any serious way. Also, something to note is even though the 1030 I'm using here is passively cooled, it's clocked and performs identically to the actively cooled MSI variants. I also added in benchmarks for a GTX 1050 to represent what the next step up in performance would be on a new graphics card, which for the GTX 1050 is currently around $40 to $50 more than a 1030. I tested each of these cards in 4 games: PUBG, Overwatch, GTA 5, and Rocket League. Let's start with Overwatch. At 1080p, I set all the tabs in the advanced section section to medium, which is much harder to run than if you just select the general graphics setting to medium. In terms of performance, each of these GPUs gave a playable experience, with the 1050 being the best, the 750 Ti second best, and the GT 1030 last. Moving on to PUBG at 1080p with the low preset, all these cards provided a playable experience, but the 1050 was the only one that really provided an enjoyable experience with an average above 60 FPS. Moving on to GTA 5 at 1080p with most tabs set to high, which in GTA 5 is more like medium, all these cards performed well, with only the 1030 averaging below 60 FPS. The final game I tested was Rocket League at 1080p quality preset. All cards obviously handled this just fine, all averaging well above 60 FPS. So what do all these numbers mean? Well, if you have $100 or less to spend on a graphics card, it really doesn't make much sense to buy a GT 1030 unless you absolutely need the smaller size or lower power requirement. Your best bet in this case is to go used and buy something like a GTX 750 Ti. If you're able to save up a little more money, which I highly recommend, spending $40 or $50 more on something like a GTX 1050 will provide you with a great deal more performance, especially if you're wanting to play stuff like PUBG. So I think it's about time to start wrapping this video up then. Is the GT 1030 worth it at $100? I really don't think so. At $70, I said it had questionable value, and with a price increase of over 40%, most of this goes out of the window. I'm thinking of picking up one of the new cut down 1030s to see exactly how much worse it is, but we'll only do that if it's something you guys would be interested in seeing. So let me know in the comment section down below. Right now, your best bet is to either go used, save up a little bit more for a better GPU like a GTX 1050, or if you're building a new system from scratch, consider basing it around one of AMD's new Raven Ridge APUs, which provide a surprising amount of gaming performance for the money. So yeah guys, I think this wraps this video up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up, as well as consider subscribing for more PC and tech related content in the future. And as always, this is Matt from Tech by Matt, signing out.